Welcome to the podcast, everybody. This is Don't Feed the Bears, the official video podcast of the Baylor Sports Desk. I'm Daniel Hill alongside Greg DeVries.
A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. This is the first podcast where all 50 states are tuned in. We finally hit all 50. High five.
Yes, we finally got our download from Vermont. Thank you very much. We love maple syrup. And let's get right to it with the football. So, some interesting developments in the Big 12 as Oklahoma State shockingly fell to West Virginia. And West Virginia is Baylor's next opponent.
Yeah, and it was, really hard to make of which West Virginia team was going to show up. Because if you think about it, they started the season against William and Mary and looked pretty darn bad. Then they went and looked okay and lost to Oklahoma. So-so against Georgia State, but it's hard to tell with these, really bad schools. And then they looked really good against Oklahoma State. So which team is going to show up against the Bears? It's hard to tell.
Exactly. And I had kind of chalked this game up for the Bears as a win, but I'm a little skeptical of that. I mean, I'm still confident the Baylor's going to win. I'm just not so sure it's going to be as easy as we might have previously thought. What is West Virginia's identity? How is Cody Trickett at quarterback? They've got an interesting running back in Charles Sims. So they've got some talented pieces, and when you consider how much talent they lost, it's a little surprising to me, at least, that they beat number 11th ranked Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and if you look at their quarterback, 6'2", 180. So to me, if you can get some hits on him early, kind of rattle him a little bit, he's not a guy that's going to stand strong in the pocket and, take these hits, down after down after down. So that could work to the Bears' advantage. And we saw that against Oklahoma State. He got the shoulder injury, and they had to put in another quarterback for, I think it was only one play, but you kind of get my point. And then, Charles Sims, transfer from the University of Houston. He's really good at making plays out of the backfield, catching the ball or, taking the handoff. And he's kind of tricky. He's a guy willing to, the play says go left, I'll go left, but maybe I'm going to change my mind and go right. So the Bears definitely have to keep an eye out for him.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that West Virginia still has plenty of question marks, but it's intriguing that their defense held J.W. Walsh to a 38.1 QBR. He threw 2 interceptions. So, maybe they have a legitimate defense, but regardless, I think with Oklahoma State losing, this puts Oklahoma and Baylor in the driver's seat in the Big 12.
Yeah, and now Oklahoma ranks number 11, and Oklahoma State falling all the way to 21. That puts them below Texas Tech. So, they were in the conversation for, can they win the Big 12? On our first podcast of the year, I picked Oklahoma, you picked Baylor. Those two picks are looking pretty good now.
Yeah, they're in the driver's seat right now, and Baylor hops up to number 17 now. And, a lot of people have been questioning the strength of schedule for Baylor, and I do think that's a fair criticism. But considering the large margin that they've won their 3 games so far by, I think you can look at this game as somewhat of a statement game for Baylor because West Virginia will be riding high. They just pulled off, the upset of the Big 12 so far this year. And Baylor will get a chance to make a statement right off the bat at Floyd Casey, game 1 in the Big 12 against some real competition. And if they come out and play up to their potential, I think this could be a 20, 25-point win for the Bears.
Well, that would be quite the game for so far these have all been over at halftime. So that would actually be maybe something to stick around for, past more than just half of football.
Yeah, a 25-point win would be half of the margin we're used to, not even half.
But yeah, so you hear a lot of talk around campus about how, Baylor looks like a top 10 team. Some, not I, are saying top 5 team. And the rankings come out and it's 17th. Well, you know what? Because of that strength of schedule, that's really all you can ask for at this point. Let the games play themselves out. And if Baylor is really a top 10 team, then that'll unfold. But you can't play Wofford, Buffalo, and ULM and say, hey, why aren't we in the top 10? Nothing has been proven yet. And it's going to happen if it's meant to happen.
Yeah, I agree. They haven't earned it yet. But, one thing that I guess will be interesting, or at least that I will be looking for, is, the defense has been good through 3 games, but they still, like we've all been saying, they haven't played anyone. And then the other thing that we haven't seen yet is can Bryce Petty still run this offense against a defense that is ramped up a notch?
Yeah, there are a couple things that we really haven't seen is, can Petty make those throws that only you can make against a Big 12 defense. So far the receivers are open by a wide margin, and those are easy throws to make. But can you fit the football through that window? And with tougher defenses coming, those are throws he's going to have to make. And in the past, we've seen him kind of sail him to the sidelines, or short hop receivers, or miss very rarely on long balls. But it's things like that, and then dealing with pressure is another thing. Really hasn't been under pressure too much. Teams haven't really been able to break through this stout offensive line, but eventually somebody's going to. And can Petty roll out, make a play, on the fly? Can he deal with guys coming at him? Can he take a hit? I think he can, but I can't base that on anything. I just know he's huge, and it's easy for those guys to take hits.
He has all the talent and all the upside in the world, but it's still a question that he has to answer. And then another thing that I think works in the Bears' favor in this game, especially, is the fact that if you look at last year's contest versus West Virginia, they lost 70-63. The defense definitely struggled, and I think that's a chip on their shoulder. This year they want to come out and they want to show that the defense can contain West Virginia, much like the defense wanted to show that they can contain ULM after their meeting last year. And the defense stepped up to the challenge against ULM. We'll see if they can do it against West Virginia.
And so rolling on to the NFL, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, why is the Texans fan going beast mode? And that is because of the bet. Why don't you explain to the good people what happened?
Well, last week on our podcast, Greg and I made a nice little friendly wager that if the Seahawks won, he, being the Texans fan, would have to wear a Marshawn Lynch jersey. And if the Houston Texans won, I, being the Seahawks fan, would have to wear an Andre Johnson jersey. So for our first ever video podcast, you guys get to see Greg wearing his beast mode Marshawn Lynch jersey. And I think it's fantastic. But honestly, it really was the game of the week in the NFL this week.
Yeah, and we actually talked about, for this wager, applying the Vegas line, which is Houston Texans +3, which would have made it an exact tie. Because it was, 20-23, I think? And that just, I always have this theory that the Vegas guys are the smartest guys in the room. So I thought that was really interesting. But, the Texans had such a lead in this game. And you were at the game, and I was not sending any text messages to you because I just knew something was going to happen in typical Texan fashion, and it did.
Yeah, I was sitting in the second deck in the end zone. I don't know north-south or any of that, but it's the end zone where Garrett Graham scored the Texans' first touchdown, and it's the end zone where the Seahawks started their 98-yard drive going the other way. But it really was a tale of two halves, and if you look at the box score does not reflect a Houston Texans victory. The Seahawks had 15 first downs compared to the Texans' 29. The Seahawks on third down were only 3 of 14. So they had 3 third down conversions the entire game. That's a mind-numbing stat. But then the big one is turnovers. The Texans and Seahawks each lost a fumble. Then Schaub threw 2 interceptions, and Russell Wilson only threw 1. But it's incredible that the Texans had a 20-3 lead. I was sitting in the stands, and I was with my little brother Michael was with me to the left. My older brother Josh was with me to the right, and we were all just kind of sitting there. We were sitting back in our seats, just depressed out of our minds because the Texans dominated the Seahawks in the first half, and I didn't have a lot of faith moving into the second half.
Well, let's talk about Matt Schaub for a little bit because this is the second week in a row where he's come out and played pretty well, and he finished the game with 355 passing yards, which is more than respectable. But after the game, the pick six was really just what it didn't seal it because I don't think the Seahawks.
It tied the game. It made it 20-20.
So, but that pick six is just demoralizing. And then after the game, it came out that Matt Schaub actually shut down his Twitter account, and I'm scared for the man. I mean, that is not the sign of a leader. It's not the sign of a guy that is going to bounce back next week against the 49ers, who, by the way, have a pretty good defense of their own. So, as a Texans fan and as just a guy who cares for the well-being of Matt Schaub, I'm a little concerned.
And, Russell Wilson is kind of known for his composure around Seattle, and one of his big sayings is to ignore the noise. And when Matt Schaub deletes his Twitter account after a really bad loss, that tells me that the noise is getting to him, that it's bugging him, and that he's not focused on football. He obviously he wants to win, but if you're being distracted outside of football, and if your Twitter bothers you that much that you have to delete it after a win, it just kind of makes me wonder where his mental fortitude is at.
Yeah, and on the season, 8 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That's not Super Bowl numbers, and that's kind of what the Texans expect this year. Is we want to get to that stage. And Matt Schaub's just not doing it. And it's no secret, around the NFL, around the city of Houston, that Matt Schaub is not a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. I mean, the Texans aren't fooling anybody with that. But at the very least, you can ask for a leader, a guy that's going to go into the locker room and say, you know what, guys, this is my bad, but you know what, we're going to bounce back and we're going to kick some butt next week against the 49ers. And that's just not happening.
Yeah, and the way that when Schaub threw the interception, he didn't get up and chase after Richard Sherman, even though it would have been, difficult for him to run him down. But it would have shown hustle. It would have shown heart. Instead, he sat on the ground, he pounded the turf, he didn't get up, and that's just kind of the attitude that you don't want in the franchise quarterback.
And a lot of Texans fans, when things start to go pretty gloomy with Matt Schaub, turn to T.J. Yates. T.J. Yates is a 5th-round draft pick out of UNC, I believe.
North Carolina.
And the reason that they turned to him is because in 2011, Yates played 6 games when Schaub went down with his foot injury, and he actually took us to the playoffs. That's when we sealed it. What people forget about that is that T.J. Yates has more fumbles than he has touchdown passes. He has as many interceptions as he does touchdown passes. And in 6 games, he threw only 3 touchdown passes. The offense under T.J. Yates was a mere shell of what it used to be, and the defense is what took us to those wins. So for all the Texans fans, and I know plenty of you are out there that are saying, hey, T.J. Yates is the answer, no. Taj Boyd is the answer. That's for another podcast.
I agree that for right now, Matt Schaub is the guy, but it's really incredible when you consider the plethora of weapons that are at his disposal. He has a Hall of Fame wide receiver in Andre Johnson. He has one of the best backs in the game right now in Arian Foster. And Arian had a great game against the Seahawks, 102 rushing yards. He had 69 receiving yards and a touchdown. I mean, he did it all. He was a complete running back in this game. It was really impressive. But, it's just you can only go so far as the quarterback. Everybody says it. It's a quarterback-driven league. And, unfortunately for the Texans, I think they have all the pieces in place. They just don't have that game-changing quarterback.
And the Seahawks were your Super Bowl pick. My Super Bowl pick was not the Texans, actually. It was the Denver Broncos. And the Denver Broncos are currently led by Peyton Manning, who, if you could describe his season so far, flawless. 16 touchdowns, 0 interceptions.
I think it would be perfect and astronomical would be my 2 words. Because right now what Peyton Manning is doing at the quarterback position is unprecedented. But the reason why I picked the Seahawks was because I feel like they're the most complete team. They can beat you passing the ball. They can beat you running the ball. They can beat you with their defense, and they can beat you with their special teams. They're so well-rounded all around that's why I picked them to win the Super Bowl. And I think Russell Wilson doesn't quite get the credit that he deserves because in that 4th quarter against Houston, he took over the game. He made the big plays when they had to have them. He was scrambling for 3rd down conversions. He was scrambling for 4th down conversions. He accounted for almost every yard that their offense generated there at the end. And, to me, Russell Wilson is a game changer at quarterback. That maybe he's not getting the hype or the credit that he deserves.
And so next week, Seahawks, Colts. I can't imagine you're going to go against your Seahawks.
No, I just think on the road, when you're on the road, what do you bring? Your run game and your defense. That's what the Seahawks have. They started slow against Houston. I don't think that they'll do that 2 weeks in a row. I think they'll come out, they'll show Andrew Luck what a dominant defense looks like.
But how good has Andrew Luck been? I mean, to lead that win against the 49ers, and I believe that was in San Francisco too.
It was.
I mean, that was very impressive. And then, well, obviously, they're going to beat the Jaguars because the Jaguars are historically bad. But still, Andrew Luck is definitely proving that he was worth that number 1 overall pick. So he's going to be hard to contain.
Yeah, the Colts are on the rise, but our 2 teams can do each other a favor. If the Seahawks can go beat Indy and if Houston can go take care of the Niners, I know I'll be happy and you'll be happy.
Dude, as long as we just get that win. But moving on to another team of note in this area, the Dallas Cowboys. They've got the Broncos. Cowboys, they kind of got taken for one by Phillip Rivers.
They did, and I think Phillip Rivers and the Chargers as a whole are a better team than we might have originally thought they were in the preseason. But if you look at this from a Dallas standpoint, this is a huge statement game because right now the Cowboys are sitting at 2-2. They can look great and they can also look really bad. And you saw a little bit of that just this last week where they were leading San Diego. It was 20-11, I believe, but then they choked and gave away the game. And I think Tony Romo is a game changer at quarterback. I've always kind of backed Tony Romo. That's getting a little bit more difficult to do, but he does have a lot of weapons around him. And the Cowboys have kind of been belittled for their lack of a home field advantage. But I think if they can come out and if they can just make it a competitive four-quarter game, because Denver has not played a close game at all. But I think if they can come out and play Denver tough, that'll say a lot about the Cowboys.
And one thing that Cowboys do have working for them is their division has turned out to be incredibly weak. You know, the Giants have yet to get a W. The Eagles are 1-3 now. I mean, and the Redskins.
The Redskins are 1-3. So even at 2-2, the Cowboys are in first place in the NFC East.
So you know, the Cowboys don't even necessarily have to go out and get a win. Just something, you know, confidence building going forward. You know, they're still going to lead the division after Sunday, right?
Exactly.
So as long as you can just have something to say, hey, at least we've got this going forward. The Cowboys are in, you know, great position to win what has turned out to be a very weak division.
Yeah, you know what? I do think that this game will be closer than people think it's going to be. I think that Dallas can play Denver very tough. I think they match up pretty well with them. You know, the Cowboys can generate points, and the defense has looked improved this year. So, you know, this might be a slip-up game for Denver. Who knows? But, you know, if you look at real quick at how do you feel about the Texans-Niners? Because this is two teams that are, you know, they're almost Super Bowl caliber teams. The Niners were in the Super Bowl. The Texans, a lot of people think, can get to the Super Bowl. But right now, we don't really know what either of these two teams are.
Yeah, the Niners were expected to come out and be just as dominant as they were in, you know, for much of the playoffs, riding Colin Kaepernick. But you know, early they didn't really establish the run game. Then they kind of did, and Kaepernick looked very erratic. You know, maybe they've settled in, and you know they took care of that last week. But you know, if there's going to be a week to, you know, hit your stride, it's going to be against this just mess of a Houston Texans team. And you know, defensively, the Texans have been very good. But you know, with the lack of confidence and leadership in that locker room, I think, and I hate to say it, but the Niners could hit their stride this week and just, you know, go off on a tear.
But if the Texans win, do you think this can be a galvanizing kind of season momentum type win for the Texans?
Of course. I mean, to beat an opponent that was a Super Bowl pick by many and, you know, is as good as the Niners, that kind of reassures, you know, the whole Texans locker room, like, hey, maybe we are this good. You know, maybe we slipped up early. And, you know, last year was just the opposite. They came out really strong, you know, 11-1, and then crumbled at the end. And we always talk about it. It's when you get hot. So if the Texans can crumble now and then get hot when the playoffs start, to me, that's a perfect formula.
And the Texans have shown the ability to play with the elite teams in the NFL. They just haven't shown the ability to put together a complete team against those elite teams. So, you know, I'd like to see a complete game from the Texans. I think they can do it, but it's going to be a tough matchup regardless. But, you know, if we can dial it back to Baylor here for a second, Baylor volleyball, they opened up Big 12 play on Saturday with a sweep against Iowa State, and then tonight they take on Texas. It's going to be on national TV, ESPNU at the Farrell Center. Should be a good one.
And over to soccer, the girls had a 1-0 win against Oklahoma to open up conference play, and then an unfortunate 4-3 loss to West Virginia. West Virginia, by the way, in the top 25. And so Friday they'll take on BYU at home, and no game on Sunday. Watch your football.
Yep, I hope you enjoyed the first video podcast. This has been Don't Feed the Bears. Thanks for watching.